The importance that you ascribe to an action and an activity, the way that you live and the way that you consider what is going on around you, it's a matter of time, it's a matter of perspective, it's a matter of how you view things. In Habbakuk chapter 1, the prophet talks to God, and the prophet says to God, "You are from everlasting. You are God. You are powerful. You properly and appropriately and with all knowledge judge. You have your hand upon us, and you are doing great things." If this is true about God, it is appropriate that the way that God sees things would be different than how we see things. For we know when we enter into this world and as we grow up and as we learn the truth and the reality of this earth, that I have a day I started. I have a day I will end. I can give the day of my birth, the day that I entered into the society, and indeed a lot of the records, a lot of the things that are recorded, a lot of the things that are going on around when I am being identified, one of the pieces and metrics of figuring out who I am ties to my date of birth. Likewise, what ends up happening is, even though I do not currently today know the day that I'm going to die, I live in a fashion whereby I am dealing with my own mortality. I am dealing with my own aging. I cannot look in a mirror but be reminded that I am older than I've ever been up to this point in time. And in terms of this, I don't have the perspective that God has. I don't have a perspective that makes sense the way that God's perspective makes sense. I do not have all the information on what people are doing all around me, and so if I were to try and judge people, I wouldn't be able to do what God can do, because I would be missing information, and some of the information that I might miss in terms of truly passing judgment on another human being might be such that I would make a mistake. I would do it wrong. I would otherwise fall short of what God is up to. So knowing this about how God is different than we are, and knowing that God does not have limitations in terms of his start and his end, knowing that God does not have limitations in terms of his understanding, in terms of bringing judgment, there's one more thing about who God is that's really worth considering and that's really important. And that last thing that is important for us to consider when we think about who God is and thinking about how I might relate to him is that God cannot stand wickedness, evil, or destruction. And the evil that people do one to another, the evil that we partake in that end up making us different from God's standard and God's purpose is simple. Understanding God's eternal perspective and that he is without beginning and without end. Understanding that God has all information and all knowledge to properly judge. The third thing that is worth my considering at this point in time is that God is righteous, God is pure, and God is totally opposed to evil. And as God is totally opposed to evil, we have to consider for a moment what evil is and why God is opposed to it. And from the very basis in the beginning of Moses taking the children of Israel out of Egypt, God caused Moses to bring this tribe, this people, this slave nation before him at the place where God had originally talked to Moses. And with this, he gave as a frame and an understanding for people the Ten Commandments. And the Ten Commandments, as God gives them, are instructions about what they are to do and who they are to be and what is supposed to happen. And so with the instructions, this is the basis for what sin is. This is the basis for what God is doing. And this is the basis whereby, as the children of Israel are receiving instruction from God, God is defining sin. You shall not murder. You shall not covet. You shall not steal. You shall not take away from your neighbor. You shall live in the fashion that God deems that a society and a people should live. And first and foremost is, of course, that you shall have no other gods before the God who loves you. You shall not worship anything else. Nothing else shall get in the way of your loving God, your walking with God, your knowing God, your trusting God, and you're creating a society where God is recognized. And this is the basis out of which everything else is worked out for us to deal with sin. Why does God hate sin? I'm going to propose two things. One reason that God hates sin is because when people sin, they are doing damage to themselves. And as they are doing damage to themselves, you might say, well, how does anybody else have an opportunity to tell me whether or not I can damage myself? And that might be okay as a rationalization if you weren't so connected to other people. But everyone is connected to parents who brought them into the earth. Many of us have siblings who have been born into the same family that we've been born into. Many of us have aunts, many of us have uncles, many of us have cousins, many of us have communities and societies that we have either been born into, many of us have gone to schools or have otherwise been part of networks, many of us have been part of worship communities, many of us, even if we leave the community of our origin, will move to a new community and will create new relationships that are in the communities that we start over in. Some of us will end up getting the opportunity to end up having relationships. Your relationships might be economic. Your relationships might end up being romantic. Your relationships might happen in a whole variety of different ways. And here's the kicker. You don't actually belong simply to yourself, but if you are created by a God who brought this entire planet into being, you have a relationship with that Creator who made you, whether or not you believe in the Creator, whether or not you recognize the relationship. If you have a Creator, you have a relationship with one. And you might go, I see no Creator, I have no understanding of a creator. I'm not even sure that the creator exists. Someone's simply being invisible to you right now does not mean their lack of existence. I have children. I have 5 children. And of my 5 children, I have a child in Los Angeles. I have a child who lives in northeastern Europe. I have a child who lives in New York State where I live, but this child lives hundreds of miles away. And I have 2 children who live in Virginia. Because these children are currently invisible to me does not mean they don't exist. Because these children who are related to me are in different places doesn't mean that their father doesn't have a concern for them. Because I don't see a person does not mean they don't exist. And while it's a little bit of a stretch in terms of the analogy, and if you don't like the analogy, I understand. But the whole idea that you do not currently seek God, the whole idea that you do not currently see God, the whole idea that God is not perceivable by the senses that we have does not mean God does not exist. My children, I will see none of them today. All of them will exist. Some of my children I may not see for a year. It does not mean that that child does not exist. Some of my children I will see from time to time, and I look forward to the opportunities to see them. And even if I have a child who I do not see for long periods of time, that child does not cease to exist. And I just want to push back a little bit on the idea that because you do not see God currently, God is unable to relate to you, to draw close to you, and to make himself known to you. In terms of evil, God does not want evil done because he doesn't want harm to you. He doesn't want harm to those around you. He doesn't want harm done to his creation, and he knows how evil multiplies, and he knows how the world transitions, how it changes, how it gets better, and dare I say, how it gets worse. And even though God is from eternity past and has no end, he knows that the world that we are on has a beginning and has an end. We've had many societies that have raised up and that have had great technology, that have had great trade, that have found themselves to be terribly powerful. And then they recede and they disappear. We have in history knowledge of Victorian England when it was said the sun never set on the British Empire. That came to a close. We have had times where Portugal or Spain have ruled the oceans, have been powerful and have run things, and it's just been amazing what they have done and what they've accomplished. Those seasons came to a close. We have had the raising up of Germany under a very charismatic leader, Adolf Hitler. And he claimed that he was going to end up making 1,000-year reign. And we know that his arrogance, his power, his lifting himself up, and his attempting to rule the world didn't even last 15 years and ended with utter devastation and with death beyond measure. If you measure the 12 million who died in the concentration camps as Jews, as political prisoners, and as other undesirables that Hitler hated, if you measure the amount of people who died in the European theater in terms of war, and if you measure the fact that once Hitler got going, there ended up being a war also in the Pacific where Japanese fascism was encouraged by Italian fascism and German fascism to the point where people tell me the number might be 100 million people who ultimately died because of this. It is not a hard thing to bring you to history and to show you how sin has done total wickedness. And I'm not going to take this video and tell you about how what Adolf Hitler did was marbled with sin at the very beginning, and how his hatred of Jews, how his hatred of the marginalized, how his encouraging German-speaking people that they were superior to everybody else and they could do harm to everybody else and it wouldn't be a problem. How all of this came together and wove into a fabric that was laced with poison in terms of sin, and did damage and destruction, and ultimately led to 100 million people dying. God is against sin. And whether you think that a minor sin that you commit will end up starting an avalanche such as Adolf Hitler's sin and his wickedness is not for you to decide. Because we have a God who judges. We have a God who loves. We have a God who cares for us. And we have a God whose frame is not limited by the time frame of my life or your life, but he lives forever. We have a God who will judge properly because he knows all things, he understands all things. He understands things about you that you don't understand yourself. And he also understands what ends up happening in all of human history. And we have a God who hates evil and wickedness because he understands that the very seed of evil being planted initially can end up going far beyond anything we can imagine. And he wants righteousness, graciousness, truth, life, freedom, all the good things that he has made available to humanity to come together. And he is against the sinner. He is against the selfish. He is against those who covet what other people have. He's against those who cavalierly use other people and destroy them in the process. He is against the things that bring evil, horror, and wickedness to humanity. And though he is invisible, he wants to be known by you, and he wants to make himself known. Shalom.